introducing our next speaker, who is Ed Keller. Ed Keller is an associate dean here at Parsons. He's an artist, a musician, a writer. He's involved in a number of different projects, and most importantly, co-chairing this project. What we're going to have is a very special session right now with Ed, who's going to steer this lightning talk and discussion. Ed?
Skype session going on here simultaneously. And the Skype session is with Peter Watts. The Skype session is with Peter Watts off in Canada. So let me first introduce Ted Butler, who is an assistant professor in the Communication Design Technology program here at Parsons and visiting fellow at the Law School Information Society Project. We'll keep these introductions very short because everyone's got incredibly long list of accomplishments. And Peter Watts, again, is joining us via Skype. Peter Watts is an artist, a scientist, the author of Starfish, which achieved a notable Book of the Year award, and author also of Blindsight, which is a novel I'll be reading three quotes from, which I really find tremendously. Nick, could you take us down on the slides? I also want to thank Natasha and Humanity Plus again. So far, this has been enormously fun, and I'm really excited that this discourse will be happening at Parsons around really thinking about the outside design. So the panel is titled Out There, and it's on xenobiology, risks, planetary non-human ecologies, self-organizing systems, transmaterials, information structures, non-human intelligence. In preparation for the panel, and we were supposed to be joined by Perry Hall, who's a phenomenal sound artist, painter, filmmaker, and abstract expressionist. Perry couldn't make it here at the last minute, so if he's out there watching, which I suspect he is, greetings. When we were preparing for the panel, we were in dialogue, sending emails back and forth around a range of questions. What's at stake in a kind of a rethinking of not only the bounds of human life, but the definition of life itself? Is there a dark ecology already present on Earth, which is not only evidence of multiple paths of evolution in our own corner of the galaxy, but which could also provide models for us to reimagine the limits of organic life in material systems and across multiple time spans? So my talk is titled, What is a Body? What is Life? What is the Alien? I'd like to begin with two quotes. My body, in fact, is always elsewhere. It is tied to all the elsewheres of the world. And to tell the truth, it is elsewhere than in the world because it is around it that things are arranged. It is in relation to it, and in relation to it as if in relation to a sovereign, that there is a below and above, a right, a left, a forward and a backward, a near and a far. The body is the 0 point of the world. There, where paths and spaces come to meet, the body is nowhere. It is at the heart of the world, this small utopian kernel from which I dream, I speak, I proceed, I imagine, I perceive things in their place, and I negate them also by the indefinite power of the utopias I imagine. My body is like the city of the sun. It has no place, but it is from it that all possible places, real or utopian, emerge and radiate. That's an excerpt from a radio lecture that Michel Foucault gave in 1966. But nearly a century earlier, in 1872, Samuel Butler wrote in Erewhon, "Man is such a hive and swarm of parasites that it is doubtful whether his body is not more theirs than his, and whether he is anything but another kind of ant heap after all. May not man himself become another sort of parasite upon the machines, an affectionate machine tickling aphid?" So, Da Vinci's image of the Vitruvian man gives us a body that can be seen, that can be geometrized and measured. It's an image that positions the human body as a proportional model for thought, for all our design work, even for the universe. The human body is a lens by which to analyze and comprehend the cosmos. And this image, of course, has always been challenged, both through a wide range of historical examples, from Rabelais' extraordinary writing in Pantagruel, and these are purported illustrations of Pantagruel, to contemporary science fiction in films like Andromeda Strain by Wise, 1971, or Natalini's film Splice, 2009. And in these, the model that we're offered is of bodies that we understand not through their measure alone, but through their capacity as agents, formed by and participating in complex networks. So, our concept of the body, the human body as a discrete entity with knowable and obvious boundaries, has shifted into a more nuanced, complex image. It's interwoven with the threads of its context, the ecological, political, geographical, that echo our evolved systems-defined notions of other phenomena. In a brief text for Edge, which is titled Scanning for Non-Human Humans, Paul Ewald, who's professor of biology at Amherst, writes, about a decade ago, and so this would now be about 14 or 16 years ago, one member of a Stanford team scraped spots on 2 teeth of another team member and amplified the DNA. They found sequences that were sufficiently unique to represent more than 30 new species. And then there's a kind of series of paragraphs where he unpacks the implications of this and the medical implications. And he says, after focusing on a couple of diseases, he says, so not only may thousands of viruses need to be tested to find one correlated with a chronic disease, but even then, it may be one of perhaps many different infectious causes. You know, incredibly complex phase space emerging around a particular disease. Now, you could say that orthogonal life would create a shadow biosphere that's not in competition for resources with ours. And indeed, in a paper titled Xenobiology, a new form of life as the ultimate biosafety tool, Marcus Schmidt observes that even ordinary DNA and synthetic chemically unique XNA might interact through epigenetic landscapes. But he goes on to say that for safety reasons, that possibility should be engineered out. And there's more than a little bit of hubris there, and not thinking about all the other hidden phase spaces that a shadow biosphere might have dragging around behind it. But my point here would be, couldn't there already be orthogonal life? And how could we choose what parts of it to interact with or preserve? Because it might actually have something to do with part of our mind. It might be part of our mind, in a way. So now I'd like to quote briefly from Peter Watts' description of Rorschach, which is an alien artifact or ship, or machine, or technology, from his novel Blindside. Quote, Rorschach's skin was 60% superconducting carbon nanotube. Rorschach's guts were largely hollow. At least some of those hollows appeared to contain an atmosphere. No earthly form of life would have lasted a second in there, though. Intricate topographies of radiation and electromagnetic force seethed around the structure, seethed within it. Charged particles raced around invisible racetracks at relativistic speeds, erupting from jagged openings, hugging curves of magnetic force strong enough for neutron stars, arcing through open space and plunging back into black mass. Occasional protuberances swelled and burst and released clouds of microparticulates, seeding the radiation belts like spores. Rorschach resembled nothing so much as a nest of half-naked cyclotrons tangled one with another. Now, we could ask how radically different this is from the world we live in. It sounds really damned exotic. But think about a city. Infrastructure, information flows, highways, culture, economies, many ecosystems that are connected, which amplify each other into very weird quasi-living systems. All those components can be understood as the layering of many extended phenotypes, each interacting with each other, and at different rates and across different scales of time. So that brings me to my final point, that bodies capture a history, abstract that history, and translate it, and send it forward into a future where it unpacks itself through varying degrees of lossy and lossless codecs. Bodies and design constantly manage different regimes of time. As J.G. Ballard said in The Drowned World, these are the oldest memories on Earth, the time codes carried in every chromosome and gene. Every step we've taken in our evolution is a milestone inscribed with organic memories, from the enzymes controlling the carbon dioxide cycle to the organization of the brachial plexus and the nerve pathways of the pyramid cells in the midbrain. Each is a record of 1,000 decisions taken in the face of a sudden physicochemical crisis. The brief span of an individual life is misleading. Each one of us is as old as the entire biological kingdom. I've read that quote probably half a dozen times in different conferences in the past 2 years, because it's absolutely astonishing quote. But a remarkable kind of cheerful pessimism seems to pervade Ballard's thought. Indeed, he had his finger and his mind on the pulse of the world we knew in the 20th century. If, and this is a reductio ad absurdum, he identified one key concept, it might have been just this, that the very idea of taking a pulse had to index all the factors outside the obvious physical parameters of a system, and that a pulse, perforce, was temporal as well as physical. Much as political philosopher Alexander Kojève understood that metasystem stability catalyzed a kind of distillation of historical consciousness, or a kind of quiet nullification of it, Ballard knew that the spheres of the neurophysiological, the biopolitical, the very temporalities of culture and technology were in a tight series of feedback loops with each other. He was unafraid to speculate on the weird, non-pulsed time landscapes, time for him inseparable from consciousness itself, that would result as humanity continued its headlong rush to fuse with the machinic, with the elemental, with the non-organic, geo-techno-cosmological systems. So I would say the great problem we face today as designers and thinkers is the mapping of ever more complex hidden systems of order, cryptoform, if you will. That long-standing project to distinguish between explicit and implicit order, to make a claim for one's work based on that articulation. And another long-standing question, whether larger systemic forms, again, political, economic, urban, technological, etc., are capable of provoking some kind of historical consciousness. This would tie back into the different strata of memory that Ben Goertzel was talking about earlier in the morning. And whether this provocation of historical consciousness would take place either in small groups or worldwide or throughout an entire system. A pale monochrome anthropocentrism has ruled much of the work debating these orders and pulses of consciousness. To borrow a phrase that appears in connection to Donna Haraway, who argues that worlding is at stake in her work on companion species, perhaps we have never been human. And what's at stake in this would be something more than the preservation of a form. It would be the opening of a form of life, to borrow a term from Giorgio Agamben, onto regimes of time which might support very little of what we conventionally recognize as life. And perhaps that's okay. So that concludes my talk. And